Great. Well, welcome everybody. Really glad to have folks here. My name's Day Hagel. I'm the director and the founder of an organization called Mental Health Wilderness First Aid. And what we do is provide mental health training programs. So you could think of them as like first aid programs, but instead of focusing on physical health, what happens if you break your arm, etc., we focus on mental health, what to do if someone is having a hard time in the wilderness for whatever reason. And so our courses are especially focused on wilderness and remote areas. We have a lot of fun people come through. We have search and rescue teams and First Nations and tree planters and lots of outdoor and wilderness guides, that kind of stuff. I myself have been not a tree planter, but I've been a wilderness guide and outdoor educator since 2004. Lots of experience with organizations like Outward Bound Canada. I did a Knowles trip down in Wyoming around the range where I understand SROM works, which is very cool. So it was my first time encountering SROM, but then when I started talking to some of my friends about it, I realized one of my friends that I used to guide with, Sean Quinton, had a connection with you folks. He interviewed and was chatting with you some years ago. So anyway, it's neat to see like kind of the small world connections very set up as well. So that's pretty cool. So we offer courses, generally one course a month. They're mostly online, and we also offer custom courses and guest speaking events, kind of like this one, and all kinds of stuff. So I'll drop in the chat in a moment, I'll drop the link to all of our past guest speakers, just in case that's of interest to check out. But welcome to everyone. I would love to I'd love to invite you to introduce yourself in the chat, just so we have a sense of who's in the room. Melita, it's up to you if you want to do, we can do a quick hello, like an actual like mic off hello, and just see who's actually here, just because it is a fairly small group. But for now, maybe I'll finish my introductions and invite folks just to type in the chat, maybe who you are or where you are. That'd be kind of cool to see who's here. So welcome to Melita. Thank you for being here. I will just read the brief little blurb that I have about you, Melita. So Melita Zuck is the program manager at Solid Rock Outdoor Ministries, or SROM, based in Laramie, Wyoming. And SROM's mission is in the context of technical, deep wilderness adventures. Our mission is to birth and grow mature Christ followers, sons and daughters of light who become loving and loyal disciples who make disciples of all nations. And it goes on to say in our write-up, wilderness spaces of freedom, beauty, and community interaction have been crucial in Melita's spiritual journey with Christ after unhelpful early experiences of spiritual rigidity. She identifies deeply with those in Scripture who spent extensive seasons in wilderness settings, shaping and reshaping their personal identities. So we're excited to hear more about SROM and about the connection between mental and spiritual health, and about how wilderness journeys facilitate that, and the work you folks do. So as you folks can see, we're recording this event. It'll pop up on our social after. If you ask a question or make a public comment, I want you to feel free to do that. So if for any reason you would like to make a question or a comment, but you don't want it to end up in the public recording, then please let me know, and I'll be happy to edit that out before it goes public. I am here to support with any kind of tech issues in the background, so please send any I need tech support chats my way, and we'll let Melita focus on running her show. And we'll also do a sticker draw toward the end of the evening, so stay tuned for that. As always, the guest speaker's views are her own and may or may not reflect the views of Mental Health Wilderness First Aid. We're delighted to have you here, Melita. Thank you so much for taking the time. And we talked before we set this up, and we talked about, sometimes we do this more as like a formal presentation, and sometimes we have a little bit of back and forth, and sometimes it's like a full podcast style where there's a conversational flow to it. So I think we're going to let you kind of run the show and see where things go. And then if there's moments where people have questions, you're welcome to drop them in the chat at any point. Or Melita, it's up to you if you want to field questions at any point. If anyone has a comment, then you can give a little wave and we'll see if it's a good time for it. But because it's a smaller group, I think we can be a little bit more conversational. And yeah, anything I missed, Melita?
I don't think so. Hey, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, can I read some of the folks' comments in the chat? Teresa just says,
oh,
hi,
for sure.
Everyone. I'm studying from Maryland this evening. Oh, that's cool. Rachel says, I'm in Sudbury, Ontario. We had an epic winter storm a week ago. Oh, wow. It is fully spring is sprung here. We have daffodils out and everything. Sorry,
I'm
Rachel.
jealous.
Yeah, Teresa says it's snowing here this evening. Just flurries though. Wow, right on. Well, that's great. And Melita, I guess I'll say one other thing, which is that I'm grateful for you to be here, but also I was just so blown away by like the beauty in what you and I shared while we were prepping for this, and you share these like incredible, I mean, organizations want to have incredible photography, so that's not necessarily unique, but there was something kind of next level about it. And I think there's something next level about your mission as well, like not only bringing people out into these beautiful wilderness spaces, but also seeing them as part of creation and invoking spirituality in that, and inviting people into a relationship with God and with Christ through that. I think is such a unique part of what you folks do. So I've just been, yeah, kind of blown away and in awe by the beauty of what you folks do in a bunch of different levels. So I'll pass it over to you.
Cool. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, I've had so much opportunity to see so much of the beautiful creation in this world, and I feel really grateful. And really grateful to you, Day, for having me today and letting me represent SROM a little bit and tell a little bit of my story. So I'm grateful to be here. And it's great to have you all joining us today, too, those who I know and those I don't know yet. Yeah, so I'll just jump in. I have some slides, and I invited Day to just jump in, too, as she has comments, just like from the mental health side, because I in no way claim to be a mental health professional, although I have a little bit of background, and just like studies and investigation in mental health has really brought me a lot of hope in the world. And so I'm grateful for sure to be here. Do you all see the full screen? Let's hope so. I'll let you flag me down if for some reason you're not seeing the full screen. Okay, great.
Looks beautiful.
It's there.
Cool. Yeah, perfect. So just jumping in, yeah, Solid Rock Outdoor Ministries. I'm going to start with like a little bit about myself and then jump more into SROM and then into like why I believe wilderness is effective based on God's invitation to us into wilderness and a little bit on liminality within that. And so, yeah, just jumping in head first, I guess. This great shot is a group we took this past summer in the Cirque of the Towers in Wyoming, but don't tell anybody it's there. Just go secretly sometime by yourself. A little bit about me and my story. I grew up where there was lots of deciduous trees, and yeah, just like love being outside so much. And I remember some of my, well, just like I'd be outside any moment I could. I felt really free and just safest, I think. Free and safe in the outdoor spaces. This top right picture I'm taking, or like going on a Sunday afternoon hike for like 5 miles or something, and I'm carrying my little brother, at least for the start of it. He's 10 years younger than me. And then that bottom right corner picture, by the time I was old enough to like rally friends, I rallied this whole group. I think I'm like 17 on this picture, maybe 16. I'm not even sure. I think my brother chauffeured us, and we went on like a Sunday afternoon hike and just like rallied as many friends as I possibly could get to come along with me. And so for as long as I can remember, like I've been enjoying the outdoor spaces with other people and wanting to like recreate those same places, or like that sense of safety for others, and invite others into that same sense of safety that I've experienced. And along with that sense of safety, I've really feel like I've experienced like a sense of freedom in the outdoors, that maybe it's just like the wild openness that like makes me less, I don't know, like less aware of others in my surroundings as like a pretty sensitive child and even adult, that I'm just like, wow, like I'm free to be myself and I'm not like impacting others' quality of life, or even just like feel like I can live into my own quality of life more. And so that's kind of like what I'm still wanting to invite others into. And so then as I grew into my teenage years, really like experienced times of depression, like just past this picture on the bottom, just like a lot of darkness. I think like very high performance religious background and just like lots of mindsets of like, you do the right things, you get the right outcomes, and a lot of formulas that I think my personality just like really attached onto for safety. And so it didn't serve me super well initially. And here on this shot, Teresa, you remember this, but we went climbing in the New York Adirondacks. I'm like 22, maybe 21. But this was a season of my life that like I really struggled with really hard questions that within my context growing up, there wasn't a lot of like permission to wrestle with. And so that was just like both like really light season and really dark season, I would say, of just like really asking hard questions. And the person beside me there was just like actually became my intern director after my first trip. But my first trip when I was 19 was a 10-day wilderness expedition in the New York Adirondacks. And I remember being on that trip in the middle of one of these lakes, which I couldn't find a picture of, or I'd have it up here. And I remember being in the middle of this lake and just being like, wow, like this person does this for their job. Like, that's amazing. And like wanting to do that same thing, because I didn't even know as a 22-year-old, or like, I guess as a 19-year-old at the time, that something like that existed. And so I was just like kind of enthralled by this like beautiful open space where I could like move my body and feel like most alive that I ever remember feeling, really. And so, yeah, that was my first trip ever. And a few years later, this person beside me, Teresa, she invited me back to be an intern at this summer camp in Pennsylvania. And I was like, absolutely, I want to. Didn't feel worthy of it, but I really wanted to. And so I became the intern, or one of the interns there, and started leading wilderness expeditions for urban kids on the East Coast. And loved that, like came alive and really wanted to do that permanently and just like continue creating space for other people. And it was in that space too, where as I went on wilderness trips, I felt like I could like step into my true self and invite others more fully into their true self, and really even discover God in those like outdoor free spaces of nature, which led me eventually to being very transient. This little van I've lived in for a little over 3 years. I call her Lizzie affectionately. And she made it possible for me to work in mental health down in central Utah, working with people in addiction recovery. And just like taking the skills that I'd learned, even like to keep or like feel like I could be in safe spaces in the wilderness and continue creating that safety for others. And really, during the transitory phases of my life, I had so much space to like practice, I would say, like spiritual tools, right? Like becoming unattached to outcome. And just like this concept of surrender that I think as a whole, as part of my internship, was a big theme. And yeah, going into just like, I think growing up in very rigid circumstances, it was so easy to just be like, well, if my formula's not working, then I don't really have options. And really to like brainstorm other options and look into, just like what the possibilities for the world was such a good skill for me, which is what this van afforded me the capability of doing. And I also came to SROM. So a couple years before living in Lizzie, I first came to SROM on a 40-day expedition. And that was part of a greater internship, but in 2014. So I was 24 when I first came to SROM, and their 40 impacted my life greatly. It would have been like the first time outside of like my small town community, even at 24. And it was just like, blew my mind how large the world was. And again, that like theme of freedom and safety in the outdoors, where, yeah, just like loved being outside. I'm just looking at my notes here.
Is this
Yeah.
you as an
So,
instructor? Is that, or are you on the
so
40?
yeah. Yeah, so I'm leading the 40 on this trip, but we had camped, if you see below me. Can you guys see my mouse moving around?
Mm-hmm.
There, you can see that. Yeah, so below here, um, the by my mouse is where we camp on our 40-day expedition. And this is a really high snow year, but this is a glacier down below me. And we end up here around day 25 of our 40-day expedition, and then we summit peaks off this glacier. So I camped down there as a student, and then as an instructor came back several years later and was able to summit Wyoming's tallest peak, called Gannett Peak, at 13,803 feet. And that was a really beautiful experience as well, just like revisiting some of those places. Yeah. Yeah, I think from there we'll move a little bit more into like who SROM is and where they're located. Dun dun dun. So there you can see the red dot is in Laramie, Wyoming. So we're about 2 hours north of Denver. And we do a lot of our programming right there in central Wyoming and the winds. If you guys are familiar with Knowles, very similar area. And then we even go down into like the Grand Canyon down here in New Mexico. So we're like all over this area. And who knows? Who knows where we'll go next? But so far, there's like Northern Rockies is kind of where or Central Rockies is where we spend a lot of our time doing rock climbing, backpacking, mountaineering. We'll get into that in a second. So Drew Arnold is the founder of SROM, and he and his wife Mary were just like passionate. They met Jesus in just out of college, and then, or maybe still in college, but they were young people when they met Jesus, and he transformed their lives. And then it was one day during a Hebrew exam or studying for a Hebrew exam that Drew was like praying. He was just like wrestling with this question of like, God, you put it on my heart to go to seminary because he's doing a Hebrew exam. And I love wilderness so much. Like, what do I do with like this desire, this deep desire to do both? And at that time, like wilderness ministry didn't really exist. And so he felt like the Lord was inviting him to really like give and to combine them. And in that moment, as he was doing this exam, he felt like he had this like out of body experience that he was looking down on like a globe. And on this globe, there were points and dots of light all around the globe. And they were scattered all across it. And he believed God was showing him something, that people discipled in wilderness spaces could go out and become lights in the world and influence and disciple others as they would spread out. And so in 1977 is when he had this vision. And then in 1983, they officially founded Solid Rock Outdoor Ministries, which leads us to today, 43 years later. We are still living out that vision of discipling, creating points of light around the world to continue spreading Christ's love to every individual we meet. And we do that by offering courses for teens, 13 to 17, 5 to 20 days in length, adults, 5 to 40 days, and then even groups like school groups, high school or youth groups, families. Even we do fathers and families, or like mothers and children will come on one trip that we offer every summer. It's about 7 days long.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, for sure.
Well, just because that was one of the things that struck me when I was looking through the website and seeing the programs, is the family programs you run. So how long do they tend to be? I imagine that's not a 40-day program typically.
That one's not. Yeah, kind of our flagship with that so far has been a 7-day. and either like a parent with a child. We definitely have like mothers and sons, or mothers and daughters, fathers, daughters, and fathers or sons. And sometimes they bring like multiple kids depending what season they're in. But yeah, 7 days is kind of the standard for that. Yeah. Any other questions about this? I know like I'm kind of dumping a lot of information here. We do some like day trips, but really our specialty is like the deep wilderness.
What ages is that for the family trips?
The family, they are 13 and older.
Like
We kind of have found that like
teen,
13,
yeah.
yeah, younger than 13 is just like pretty hard to carry your own gear and a little food for the team, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so 13's our cap.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can't see if people are raising their hands. And so if people are, Day, you can flag me.
I'm keeping an eye out, and also I'm keeping an eye on the chat.
Okay.
So you're good.
Cool. Very good. Okay. Well, then we'll jump in. We can come circle back around to this because I think the spiritual part of our programming, we can like dive into it if people are curious about that a little later. Yeah. So what makes wilderness journeys deeply transformative? And I'm curious who all has heard of the word liminality? Or is this a brand new word to people? Day's heard of it. Cool. Okay, well,
Maybe
I'll
just
jump
me.
in.
Oh, Rachel's not sure. Rachel
Is
Thompson.
that in the
Okay.
butterfly changes? There's like a space, no?
No, it's a little different than that.
Okay.
But I love that. That's, yeah, like the metamorphosis of the shift. Or maybe it is.
Maybe,
No,
maybe it is like when it's in the cocoon.
Yeah, when they become all like gluey.
We're about to find out. Let's revisit that.
Is that what you do at SROM? You make people gluey?
We make people gluey. Yeah. Sticky. Who could be sure? Okay. Yeah, so jumping into the word of liminality, it comes from the root, or like it originates with the root word limen, which is a Latin word. And it means threshold, or stepping across a threshold. And its history is from the Dutch anthropologist Arnold van Nep, who in like the early 1900s kind of coined the term as he explored, well, and then later, a little bit later, Victor Turner dove a little deeper, and it all has to do with understanding this rites of passage ceremonies in like cultures that have like from boyhood to manhood, or some cultures like girlhood to womanhood, those kinds of things. And that transition that happens, right? Like that threshold in between. So we're going to dive into that, what this means a little bit more. And here we go. So liminality, when we're in places, there are spaces, there's seasons, maybe there are moments, but there are times where we're neither here or there. There may be times where I like anticipate something greater, but I'm not yet at that point. So this betwixt and the between, it's sometimes referred to. And often in these spaces, like rote traditional answers no longer satisfy, like just like we need stretched beyond our limits, or we're feeling stretched beyond our limits. And there's a lot of like self-doubt and questioning in these spaces, along with feelings of inadequacy, disorientation, and confusion, and feelings of curiosity and excitement, along with expansiveness. So it's kind of like all over the board, right? It's just like pretty unsettled, not quite sure where I belong. And this anticipatory of like, wow, where could I be going? There's like, what I'm doing isn't enough, and I need to be going for more. So some examples of these spaces that are like are within our culture is anytime we're learning a new skill. Puberty's pretty standard. Like you're not a child anymore, but you're also not an adult, right? Like those teenage years, if we can remember back, are like tricky, hard. exciting. Getting your driver's license is a pretty natural place within our society that, yeah, it's just like transition happens, right? Like we gain independence and there's transition there. Graduation, pretty natural. Divorce or marriage are times where like there's big shifts and we need to make pretty large adjustments. A new job or a career, the birth of a child, or the death of a loved one, children becoming adults and like families being empty nesters or parents becoming empty nesters, right? Like, and these are just a few examples to just kind of get us in our minds of like where have we experienced them as we've walked through. Like, yes, they're shifting. Maybe it is the caterpillar to the butterfly. And we're shifting from something we were into something else that's being demanded of us. I'll pause in a second for questions, but I think this chart's helpful where we're in this stage of growth, right? With the other axis of time, and this line being this continuum of growth where we like to think of growth as like a more straight line, like headed upward. And that's not really how it works in reality, right? It's like there's these highs, there's these lows, and it's in those dips of our processing that we experience like those uncomfortable feelings or like that great anticipation of like, dang, is it going to be okay? And we're more open to new possibilities and realities and have lots of questions that don't have answers. And that's the liminal space. Those low points of the curve is the liminal space. And so if you can all think in your own life back to a time where you had a current reality, right? Things were going pretty well. And then one of these events happened, right? And there's a shift. And all of a sudden we're thrown into these like drastic highs or drastic lows. Those are those pieces of liminal space, those drastic changes. And then eventually, this can be a week, this can be months, this can be years, this whole space in between here, the liminal space, where we'll come out with a new reality, a new identity, where that assimilation has happened, our brains have caught up, whatever it is, and there's an enlarged identity and capacity for new norms. And we can take on greater roles and responsibilities where we never thought we could have before. So those are some, I think, helpful charts. So maybe before we jump into the next one, any questions so far on what I've said on liminality?
I have one. Is this something that you talk about? Do you evoke this actually in your programs? Do you talk about liminality kind of explicitly, or do you just kind of embody it without naming it?
Yes and yes. So yeah, we on our longer expeditions, we name it. So our instructor trainings, we for sure name it. We do an online expedition or an online course called Transformational Leadership. And we talk about it in there. We have like an hour session on there. But then only our 40s and our instructor training, we call it our Wilderness Ministry Professional course. Those are the two that we name it explicitly. And then I might like have it in conversation or incorporate it a little bit within like the phase of like moving from the field to the front country. We call that a transference stage, where we're like helping people assimilate what they've learned in wilderness space back to the front country. We'll name it then sometimes, but it's less explicit and more like undercover of like helping people do the processing without just like talking about the fancy word. Yeah. And Rachel, I'm curious, is this kind of the butterfly thing you were thinking about, or is it different? Oh, did she leave us?
No, she's here. I think she's just not unmuted yet. It's okay, Rachel. I know it's your first time on Zoom.
I was trying to get something off my screen. Yeah, I think there is like such a shift where I'd have to look it up. It's something that a friend of mine speaks about, but you
Okay.
like yeah, yeah, you completely change forms. But there
Yeah.
is, yeah, I want to call it a jelly space. Where you're
Hmm.
just like,
Jelly space. I like
Yeah.
that. Yeah, for sure. That's super cool. Thank you for like, I like that visual, right? Because to some degree, we know that that's a huge change for a butterfly or a caterpillar becoming a butterfly. And yeah, these spaces aren't necessarily easy
Well, it
for
kind of
sure.
reminds me of the slide you had up earlier, Melita, with the idea of, the liminality or the liminal space being something that's betwixt and between. It's neither one thing nor another thing. Like, I think you and I talked about the idea of the old map or a way of living your life, perhaps, or your old identity no longer fits, but you also haven't fully stepped into a new identity yet, and so you're kind of in between. Like, I can totally picture this
Hmm.
jelly little thing that's not a caterpillar and it's not a butterfly, and like, what is it, right? And I can feel myself
Right.
that, as you invited us to think about ourselves as teenagers, and your description of your adolescence in some ways mirrors parts of mine, that like that angsty period of like, what am I and what am I doing, and that doesn't work for me, but also I don't know what does. Yeah,
Right.
it all fits, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that like old map, new map thing too, especially if we like outdoor things. Like, yeah, like I need to figure out something else because what I've been doing hasn't been working. And that like creative space is like necessary and a great part of or necessary part of change. That I mean, I wasn't taught growing up naturally. Um, I think the other thing I think of too, I'm glad you mentioned that, Day, is like, and even the butterfly, that verse in Romans, the Apostle Paul talks in Romans 12, verse 1. He says, like, be transformed by the renewing of your mind so that you can live out Christ's perfect will. This is the transformational process, right? Like the butterfly is going through that transformational process. The caterpillar is going through the transformational process to become the butterfly. And, I'm like, oh, yeah, I want to grow and I want to change. And when I am honest with myself, I'm like, I don't love these low places. So yeah, love that.
Sometimes it's almost like a crisis that can drive us to that point. Hey, like, you're describing a real process
Absolutely.
of conversion, and sometimes those low places are the most important part in the liminal cycle, I guess. Interesting.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Very important. And which brings us to the next slide of like why it's important. So the hero's journey was first developed by Joseph Campbell and became popular through his book. Let me check this out really quickly. I want to get my facts right. Yeah, his book, The Hero with a Thousand Faces, in like the mid 1900s. And he did some research around these rites of passage and what's like the process that people go through. And the hero obviously is masculine. I'll do a little disclaimer. I just recently read a book called The Heroine's Journey, which she claims is slightly different, which is fascinating if you want to take a deeper read. And for the sake of right now, we'll just stick with the hero's journey. But I think it's very relatable to myself, right? So if you look up here, I want to draw your attention to this dash between the known and the unknown, and that line, right? Because if you're like me, I like to remain within the known world, where things are like more certain, more stable. And sometimes I'm ready to like branch out of that. But we all start up here to some degree and then continue down to number 2 here through supernatural aid. So this could be like an invitation. It could be a crisis, like you mentioned, Day. There's so many things that propel us out of our known world. So it can be chosen or not necessarily chosen, but we're moving into the unknown across a threshold. So this is that liminal place, or where we enter the liminal place. And then we enter spaces that we need help. And it's very natural to need help. And I think as kids, we're like, oh, yeah, I need help. And then as adults, we sometimes grow out of the acceptability of needing help to some degree, where actually, as being human, it's always normal to need help. And the humility that goes along with receiving help is a great skill to have. And so this humility or this need for help is very natural when we're learning new things. And then as we continue on, we get help, we make it through this stage, we hit the abyss, or this death and rebirth section, where there's something that seems impassable. Some charts call it like a cave. And sometimes these are the parts of ourselves that we like strongly dislike or we've run from our whole lives. And it's brought back to us again that we can't move on unless we face this. And it feels like if I face it, I will die, which is the death, right? Like there's a part of me that will die if I'm going to be reborn. This is Christ's story, right? Of like, he enters the grave and is reborn. And so then when we make it past the abyss, we face these challenges in our life that we don't think we're going to make it past, and we make it to the other side, there's this revelation and transformation of like, wow, I just made it through the hardest thing in my life and I'm still alive to tell about it. Like, now what? I'm invincible, right? Every one of your favorite movies, good chance, mirrors this to some degree. And that transformation process then leads us towards atonement of like, what do we need to make right? What do we need to shift in our belief process about ourselves and about our world and about the people around us and maybe even God, that will then inform how we move forwards and we return into that known world. And so to me, this has been the most helpful thing to reassure myself when it feels like things are hitting the fan. You know, when life's falling apart, where do I turn to, you know, get help? When do I need help? And is it normal to get help, you know? And can I face these deepest parts, believing that resurrection and transformation and revelation will come? And so really, this is just what's naturally happening when we invite people into wilderness. And again, I mentioned a little bit on that chart, but moving through these liminal spaces, I love this picture of these guys. Like they're here, they're together, they're building resilience within the context of community, which is so powerful and almost like hard to even name and talk about what actually happens, but it happens so organically and naturally in outdoor spaces. So internally, I need humility, which builds resistance. I need to be able to admit when I need help and when I'm wrong and need to reevaluate my belief systems. And then there's an external need for like a mentor or guide who can walk alongside and field my questions and be a loving presence in these uncomfortable low points when things are sticky, you know? And when someone I can turn to for support who's been through hard places too and have come out on the other side, who have like resurrected themselves or transformed themselves. And really, when we look at the Christian walk, like Holy Spirit's there with us the whole time, right? Supporting, being this loving presence. And there's people surrounding us all the time if we know who to turn to. Well, hopefully there's people there. I've also felt those moments where it doesn't feel like there's people to be there. One more slide and then we'll field some more questions.
Okay, I'll hold it.
Okay, I was going to jump into this one real quick because I think it's just helpful also to name some enemies of liminality, because I think I've faced this as I face things that are scary. Of just like, I like the comfort, right? I like being familiar or in familiar spaces. And my own fear and anxiety keep me from moving towards these places of growth. Isolation and disconnection, super rampant in our culture today. In my own story of like, I'd rather stay hidden because it feels so much safer. Shame drives me there too, right? Of like, I feel like I'm the only one experiencing this, so why reach out? Which, yeah, is like that kind of stuck helplessness that I name. And then like sometimes even this failure to launch, I encountered a lot in mental health or like the addiction recovery work I've done, because there's like this failure to launch is there's no solid benchmarks of like, okay, now you're an adult and we commission you to go out because you have what you need. Like there's less of that happening maybe than in some cultures. And so that can be a enemy of liminality as well. So yeah, let's field some questions. I'm going to stop sharing for a moment so I can see you all while I do this. For some reason, there we go. All right, some questions.
Can you see us now?
Yeah, I like to be able to see you guys.
Well, I guess I was just reflecting, and I'll totally defer to anyone else who wants to comment. I'm curious other people's experiences with this kind of thing too. But I get the sense that one of the things that really sets SROM apart compared to like Knowles, which does some similar things in a similar area and runs a great program, and Outward Bound
Right.
Canada or Outward Bound, same thing. But
For sure.
you folks are setting out kind of intentionally to facilitate not only the wilderness experience as a I don't think you've used the term rite of passage, but you've used the term like hero's journey or a liminal space or a transformational experience. And you were talking earlier about like the importance of having a guide or a mentor as part of that experience, and it's part of the hero's journey. And I actually went and pulled out my Joseph Campbell Hero with 1,000 Faces, so I love that you mentioned that. But also you have this like parallel mission, I guess, or parallel invitation, in that it's not just a hero's journey about like your comfort in the wilderness and your like physical resilience or mental resilience or whatever, but you also have like this very intentional spiritual invitation, and you see yourself as a ministry and you name yourself as a ministry. And so part of the guiding roles that your guides will be playing is not only as a guide through the wilderness and a coach in that sense, but you're also guiding and coaching people in relationship to the divine. And I imagine you have people come out there, and maybe some of your guides do too, but I imagine you have people come out there who have had complicated relationships with God or with Christ or with religion as an organized capacity. Sure. And so part of what your guides might be doing is helping facilitate those things. So anyway, it struck me that you have a parallel, you're doing the same thing twice at the same time with the spirit and with the wilderness. So anyway,
yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I love that. Like the metaphor, the wilderness is the metaphor, right? And I would argue like this is very intentional. Like I believe in an intentional designer who like God's like designed all this together. The Hebrew root word for wilderness is order. So Bamidbar is the Hebrew word for wilderness, and the bar part is order. And it's the same word found in honeybee, in business meeting, in wilderness. Well, yeah, that's what I'm talking about. And in the word. So I'm putting, and an English speaker would look at it and be like, oh, what do those four words have in common? Honeybee, business, meeting, wilderness, and word. Like nothing in common. But like honeybees are the most ordered creatures on the planet. And we put words in order, hopefully, so that they make sense to each other. And business meetings happen in a certain order so that productivity is the result. And then wilderness is, no matter if we're in the desert or under the ocean or in the deciduous trees or in the conifers, like they're all ecosystems that are ordered, that are sustainable, unmaintained life, right? And my total belief is just like this same order is reestablished within our beings when we step apart from like the chaos of just like other people's voices. Maybe it's our culture's voices, maybe it's just like the noise of the cities, whatever it is. And our spirits can actually like get in touch with like, oh wow, there is an order beyond me. People have done research on like the all factor, right? Like those kinds of things. And I think it's like very intentionally designed. And we'll touch on this later, but like the Israelites are invited out of the slavery of Egypt into desert, wilderness. And God's like, hey, if you guys live your life this way, the 10 Commandments and Sinai, like if you live your life this way, your life, it will go well with you. This is what life is. Choose life, not death. Right? It's like this like deep contrast of God saying, you've been taught chaos. I have such good order for you. And it's not order in like the rigidity and like do the right things or else. It's this freedom of like, when you meet these base needs of your own soul and spirit and body, these are the, like, there's going to be an overflow and abundance of life. That's my little side note to your question of like, yeah, this is happening on different levels, on so many different facets, I would say.
That's so remarkable, because I would 100% have thought that if there were an alignment with wilderness and either order or chaos, I would have thought chaos for sure. But you're saying it's order, and that's an interesting like shift in perspective of like, even if you think back to the creation story, right? Like God created this out of chaos,
Mm-hmm.
created this beautiful creation, and that is nature, that is the wilderness that He created. That's
Yeah.
so interesting that you're drawing that perspective. Thanks.
Yeah, and I'm sure you could argue chaos too, right? Like, we've been taught chaos too. And I don't know the verse right off the top of my head, but Paul says how creation is groaning so that it's restored to complete order. I can post that later. But yeah, like, to me, I'm like, oh, like, you're right. There is an element of chaos there as well. And even creation wants it to be restored to full order. So just another side note. Any other questions? Love your comment, Day.
Teresa's
So good.
got her hand up.
Yeah, I was trying to raise my hand and I clapped my hand instead because I'm not very good with these things. But anyway, um, yes, and when I'm thinking about that, my mind goes to I run I run programs for teen girls, and we do wilderness expeditions within the programs. And I think back to about, I don't know, 5, 6 years ago, we had a girl who was 15, and she had been in a sibling set that was adopted, and she just always felt like her life was a mistake and that she could never fit into her adopted family, who were very good, loving parents, and ended up at our out of home placement and on a wilderness trip on the Rio in South Texas. And they were out there for 3 weeks, and deep canyons, dark, dark night skies with bright, bright, bright stars. And it's high desert camping, which is actually pretty rough. And so survival was the group bonded together to survive. And it at the end of, and it was remote enough that I think in those 3 weeks they only met two other people, and one was a ranger. And and so at the end of that 3 weeks, they were all ready for a hot shower and fresh food, but they would have loved to stay out for more time because they had bonded so much and they had become so like this feeling of confidence that they could overcome the hardships of that high desert camping. And as they were leaving, she looked around and she saw the deep canyons and remembered the night skies. And she thought, there's so much order in all of this. And God created this, and He didn't make any mistakes. And the next thought that followed was, and God created me, so I'm not a mistake either. And she came back from that trip and told us that. And she looked at me and said, for 15 years, people have been telling me I'm not a mistake. And I wanted to believe them, and I've tried to believe them. But always underneath all of that, I just felt like I was a mistake. And then she said, but now, and her voice was just so quiet and full of confidence. And she said, but now I know I'm not a mistake. And those kind of shifts is what I've seen come. I mean, that's exactly what you're talking about, this order. Those are the kind of shifts I've seen on wilderness expeditions that we don't get in talk therapy with teens.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thanks, Teresa. Yeah, wow.
I love that she got a testimony through wilderness experience. Like that told her something because it was interacting with the wilderness that brought her to that testimony. Oh, cool. Thanks, Teresa.
Yeah, that's, and like experiencing it, like deeply experiencing the wilderness for 3 weeks. Yeah. Any other questions or comments before we roll on? Okay.
Yeah.
Do the screen share thing again.
Who comes out for the 40-day expeditions? What is like the demographic?
The demographic, there's a lot. So I did it in like an in-between place. Like the place I had been working wasn't going to do wilderness expeditions, and I was devastated. I was like, what? Better go somewhere else. A lot of gap year, or like right between high school and college. And then some people just like at huge, like at liminal spaces already. They're like, sure, why not? Because it is a big commitment for sure. It's like 2 months to take off work and put in the time and money. But yeah, it's often people at big transitions already. We've had 18 to, I think 50's been our oldest, maybe 55. Yeah. So, hey, you could go for it. We've got openings this year.
There's still time for us, Rachel.
There's still time.
Actually, Melita, I don't know if you're going to touch on this later, but I wanted to say SROM offers free catalogs, and I sent away for mine. I sent away for it, but they are beautiful, and they have like incredible, not only photography but also like info about all this. So anyway, I've really enjoyed this. Thanks for sending it to me.
Yeah, I'll have the barcode at the end, or you can just go to our website, srom.org, and request one. Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, and even if it's like, it's not necessarily for you, okay, I'm going to go on this trip necessarily. I mean, I've got 3 little kids. I'm probably not going anywhere for 40 days for a while.
40's too long.
But it's like, this is an inspiration if you are leading, trips somewhere else, or you want to think more about these concepts. It's very, very cool brochure.
Mm-hmm. Or you can get a few for other people. Share them around. Yeah, for sure. Cool. So jumping back in, Teresa, I love how you led us off with a story. And I was going to tell a story. I'm going to call this guy Jack. He was a student of mine on a 40. And he grew up in a pretty isolated environment around people who didn't really speak his first language, and came on our course. And it was just like so overwhelming for him to sit in like our group evening times, because we do like circle up, share about our day, go over some of the spiritual content each evening. And he would sit in circle with just like his hat down over his eyes and wouldn't really like make eye contact. It'd be really hard for him to share. And one day Jack was just like, yeah. And I would check in with him now and then and be like, hey man, like, how you doing? Like, I noticed, like, this is what I noticed. You don't really talk much in group. Like, what's going on? And he would share with me pretty readily, like one-on-one. And he's just like, yeah, it's just like too much stimulation in the group. Like, I just like don't feel like I can interact. I just gotta like, I'm listening, but I can't really like contribute a lot. And it was interesting because his interaction in one-on-one, otherwise, like relationally, it was just like hard for him with his teammates. Whereas as long as he was having an intellectually stimulating conversation, he was fine, but like relating with them socially was just pretty tricky. And then one day we have this summit attempt, and he's just like, we come back down. I don't even know what happens on top of the peak, but we come back down and we're sitting in circle, and Jack all of a sudden is like not under his hat brim anymore and is like looking everybody in the eyes. And I'm just like, whoa, what has just happened? And so I'm just like kind of delighted by this shift, and I'm fine with not knowing more, but I was curious, and I checked in with him a couple of days later. I was just like, hey Jack, like, what's going on? And he was just like, yeah, he's like, something happened on the mountain. I like really felt God's presence, and like it actually makes me want to like be friends with these people and actually relate to them. And like, I know I don't really know how, and I'm gonna have to ask them for their help, but like I actually want to be their friend now. And like, just like, he's like, it was an encounter at a deep spiritual level up on that peak that he didn't really even have words for, but that shifted him so that he's actually able to make eye contact and be in relationship, right, with like the humans in his life, which then obviously is going to or maybe not obviously, but will impact then his relationship with the divine, which I just think is beautiful. That resonates also with part of my story, because I think it's like that secure attachment that we have with humans around us that impacts our attachment and security with God, or lack thereof. You know, if we don't trust other people, it's going to be hard to trust God, and vice versa. So I love that story. I think another story I have of a girl I'll call Kate was just this past summer. She came with a group of high school girls or high school youth who were all going into their senior year. So they're all like 17. And the first day she's like, you know, barely making it up the hill backpacking. And I'm like kind of kicking myself for not like more thoroughly getting the beauty products out of her bag. And she's just like, I can't do it. I can't do it. I can't do it. And I'm just like, oh my goodness, if you say I can't do it one more time, I don't know what I'm going to do. And anyhow, we make it to lunch break. Her peers circle around, contribute help, or at least offer help. And she is able to like give them some of her weight. And we make it to camp that evening. A couple days later down the road, we get to camp in the middle of a storm, and we're all huddling under the tarp, or they're all huddling under the tarp. I'm trying to make sure it doesn't blow away, and they're staying dry. You know, you can picture it if you've been out in these situations. And Kate is just like gathered around, and I think I hear about it later because I don't think I could really hear anything. But she's like, hey guys, like we should pray and ask God to stop this storm. And so she rallies her peers, unsolicited by any adult, because I think all the adults were outside trying to keep that tarp from blowing away. And they pray and they ask God to calm the storm. And half an hour later, I did see this part where Kate crawls out from underneath the tarp. The sun rays are starting to come through and things are slowly starting to dry off. And she's like, looks up at these sun rays and the beautiful peaks around us, because it's fabulous above tree line. And she's just like, see, God does answer prayers, you know? And I was just like, yeah, that's what I'm talking about, you know? And these are like, from these liminal moments, right, to these places where we think we're going to die. And then this transformation happens where like, she now knows beyond, like she's experienced, like your story, Teresa, she's experienced God's presence in a way that no sermon could have told her. No one could have even showed her, other than like these ferocious elements, high winds, and then some rays of sunshine and beauty and restored order really after the chaos. And so Kate and Jack just love, like these two stories of both relational connection and like connection with the divine that happens so organically in these outdoor spaces as we each step into the unknown, really.
And those things change everything. Like it changed everything for this girl. And she no longer felt like, oh, I will never fit in this, let's say, Smith family, like her adoptive family. She was like, okay, like God's put me here. I belong. I'm ready to do the work that I need to do now from a completely different foundation. And it just changes everything.
Yeah. It doesn't mean she won't doubt again, but there's a new level of foundation that she can now build on that like was expedited. Yeah. Thanks, Teresa. Yeah. Other thoughts in response to those stories? Because I think the story is, what God uses so often, right? By the word of their testimony. And otherwise, we'll get into some biblical stories. Dun, dun, dun. So, I've got a whole list. After we chatted, I thought up a bunch. So I've tried to contain myself to only the literal wildernesses. But if you want to brainstorm figurative wilderness, it's probably like every character in the Bible. So you got to limit it to the literal wilderness. And I don't have them all. So this is not an exhaustive list. But I'll just go over them briefly and then we can field questions or thoughts. Noah and his family, like it rains for 40 days and 40 nights, if we're taking the scripture literally. And then they're still in there for, I think, like almost 300 days. And so they get a pretty wild ride. Abraham lives a nomadic lifestyle, invited by God out of his normal, right, into a traveling, very wilderness setting. Oh, fun fact, by the way, this picture on the right is in the Negev, part of the Israeli Grand Canyon, which is one of my favorite places. The Hagar is Abraham's handmaiden, right, or concubine, who he kicks out after the dispute with Sarah, and she's pregnant, and he sends her into the desert to die, really. And she discovers a well and is saved, and God speaks to her in that place, powerfully changes her life. The Israelites as a whole, I mentioned them earlier, and their exodus from Egypt towards the promised land, but it takes them a while to get there, and there's lots of lessons learned along the way. Ruth, on her journey with Naomi after the death of her husband, changes cultures, right? Like that's a transitional phase, and it's believed that she says this: where I go, where you go, I will go, where you die, I will die, your people will be my people. That like very quotable, iconic scripture was said like on that journey and on the way, and that's a part of the Israel National Trail. David, as a shepherd and heir to the throne, spent time in wilderness, and then as heir to the throne is like running for his life, hiding in wild spaces, right? And Elijah has like this powerful experience of miraculous signs on Mount oh wow, I'm blanking. Anyhow, on a mountaintop, and then runs away because of a threat for his life, and just like wants to die, and is pretty much ready to commit suicide because he's taking shelter under a broom bush, which don't offer much shade. And you know, it feels like he asks like, what's the point? And I've definitely been there a lot in my life. Jonah, this is a different kind of wilderness I've never been in, but that 3 days in the whale's belly, that sounds rough. I prefer the dry land. 40 days with Jesus and nights of Jesus fasting right before the beginning of his ministry. And actually, fascinatingly enough, like right after his baptism, it says the Holy Spirit sends him into the wilderness to be there. Like no performance, didn't need to do anything right or wrong. He just needed to be. And then Paul, the Apostle Paul, right after his conversion, zealously persecuting the Christians, becomes a Christian and is in the deserts of Arabia for 3 years. And then last that I've listed is John, the Apostle John, who wrote several scriptures or books in scripture. And he's imprisoned on a remote island, and it's believed that that's where he wrote or penned the book of Revelation. So there we have some biblical examples, and I imagine y'all could think of others. But yeah, any thoughts on those or reflections even as I went through that list?
I found myself wondering about Adam and Eve.
For sure.
They were cast out of the garden. I don't know if it says they were cast into wilderness or if there's an exact connection there, but that's just what I thought of.
Yeah, there weren't a lot of shelters and cities around then, as we know, anyhow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. Each of the prophets spent extensive amounts of time out there as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
sure. The idea. Am I correct in thinking you get the model of the 40 days? I forget your founder's name, but
Drew Arnold.
That's Drew Arnold, right? Was he inspired for the 40-day model by Christ's journey in the wilderness specifically, or like, can you comment on that?
Yeah, for sure. I'll comment. You know, it was actually his son, Andrew, who's the current director, that I think had the original vision for the 40. And then, yeah, and there were several different visions, I think, around like the theme of 40, because I mean, it says 40 days and 40 nights of rain, but throughout scripture, there is a theme of 40. And yes, Jesus' identity, what part of our spiritual curriculum is focuses in on Matthew 3, where Jesus' identity is spoken over him by the Father right there before his baptism, before he is sent into the wilderness. And so it's really like this is who God, like you see yourself, but God sees you differently. And how do we live into this reality of like who God sees us as his children and his sons and daughters, and how do we live that out more fully in wilderness spaces initially, but then also as lights in the world, around the world, as we return to the front country. Yeah.
Can you comment on your spiritual curriculum that you alluded to, or are you going to? I don't want to jump ahead.
Yeah, for sure. I don't have a lot of specifics in here, but like, so have you heard, Dave, of the peak itinerary model?
I don't think so.
Okay. So this is a model we use just like without like going into that whole teaching. But like, it's really this continued growth chart and not coming to like a climax too quickly so that we're like bored. So on our 40, let's say like physically, we're doing like rock climbing for the first 10 days. And then we add another element of mountaineering. And then we add another element of some solo time. And they all like build on each other. And then we continue building even to the end of the course because the solo is right about the middle. And so there's different ways we continue building to keep people engaged and attentive and learning. Because if our brains believe that we've learned everything, they'll like stop trying. You know, it's crazy. We're pretty efficient like that. And so the same happens spiritually. And so we try to track that same reality in our spiritual curriculum, where we'll start with like pretty basic things of like, who are we as individuals? Where are we coming from? What's bringing us to this point? And then we'll move to like, what's the invitation that Christ is inviting us to? And what do I need to let down, like release, in order to step into that greater invitation that Christ is inviting us into? And then what does that mean in everyday life? And that's around the time where we do like our solo. And what does that mean in community? And what does that mean going home? And all these there's like different facets of it along the way that we try to continue growing on that same trajectory. If that makes sense. So I'm not giving you like a lot of specifics, I guess, because I feel like you got to come on a course to like really experience them. And I wouldn't be doing like justice to like tell you like explain them, because it's an experience. But that's kind of like the overall what we're going for.
I see Teresa's hand, and then I have another question.
Okay.
So Melita, is part of that curriculum, like, because I know I've heard everybody say this when they come back, like, I used to be, but now I am. Like, I forget what you call that.
Yep. We call it an I am statement. So it's a shift from who I used to be, like an old way of seeing, really, into like a new way of seeing. Yeah.
And that would be very much a part of that transformational curriculum / teaching / experience.
Yep.
And you encourage students to craft that for themselves over the course of the program. We actually take the I am statements in scripture where Jesus says like, this is who I am. And we're believing that if this is who Christ is, and we're invited to be his brothers and sisters because he's the Son of God, and we're invited also to be part of God's family, that we then can claim some of those same realities, whether or not they feel real to us in the moment or not. Like, we can claim them as a prophetic stance of like, this is what I'm going to believe for my future, and then move towards it. Like for me, one of my first I am statements was I was trad climbing, because I loved rock climbing and trad climbing. I was trad climbing I was free soloing
And when I would fall and get hurt, I'd fall and get hurt often. And I am wanting, or I am following Jesus as he's my trad lead. It was like the climbing link, something like that, you know? And like the visual helped me so much because I'm like, sure, I'll come along and clean behind you and take all the gear out of the rock, but I don't have to be the one taking the risks. And like, you know, I still need to hold myself up there. It's still stinging hard work, you know, and like those kinds of visuals are so helpful for me being like a pretty kinesthetic learner, you know?
Wow. Very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you also incorporate a solo, and did you tell me earlier that you do a student-led section on the longer courses as well?
Yeah, and independent student travel. Yeah, so we're really like this piece of like empowerment of like we've taught, and really stewardship of like, as our instructors aren't guides, they're not telling people how to, or they're not just doing the things for everybody. They're empowering everybody with the skills they need to care for themselves and feed themselves and navigate and do all the skills out there physically, and then even like keep each other emotionally safe. And what does it mean to be relationally safe in these spaces with each other? And then we'll have like on a 40-day expedition, there'll be a 7-day stint where students know how to contact instructors and know where to find the instructors at all times, but the instructors are out of sight. And that's just like another empowering way of like, and then they know where they'll meet with their instructors to do the last 24 hours and some debrief before returning base. Yeah. So it's like very empowering. Like to me, when I look back at my 40-day expedition, it was like my favorite part. I was like, what? This is amazing. Because they can like then develop their own curriculum, whatever they want to do for the soft skill part of it. And it's just like very empowering for the younger people. Yeah. Yeah, cool. Love the questions and comments. I'll keep rolling here and then we'll have some more time at the end. Did I stop the screen share?
Yes.
What happened?
You did.
I must
and
have.
For
Okay.
I see Sandra's got to run. That's fine. Thanks. Good to have you here, Sandra. For a time check, just
Yeah,
for
thanks
your
for coming.
mental headspace, it's 6:15.
And we want to wrap up by 6:30.
Yeah,
Is that the dealio?
that's a good benchmark to head for, and then people can have their
Okay.
sleeps.
You bet. Cool beans. All right. So after biblical examples, I mentioned the prophets, which I didn't include on this list other than Elijah, but Hosea is one of my favorite prophets. And we use the scripture at SROM a lot, but just a synopsis that Hosea, you can see here, he lived around 700 BC. And he, in this scripture, is penning God's words to the Israelite nation who had been exiled at this point and had been largely like not combative, but like disregarding what God had invited them into in following him through the 10 Commandments, and had just like turned aside to other gods. And so this is what God says. He says, I will win her back once again, and I will lead her, being the nation of Israel, into the desert and speak tenderly to her there. And again, I will show you, the nation of Israel, righteousness and justice, unfailing love and compassion. And I will be faithful to you and make you mine, and you will finally know me as the Lord. And that word know there again is experience. It's deeply experience at a very intimate level God as the Lord of their lives. And so really like this is God's invitation to every person, I believe. Like, yes, he still means it to the nation of Israel, and yes, he means it to the larger global population, right? Because he cares for every human. And so, yeah, I just think that Hosea penned that so well. So what do wilderness spaces provide? We've just been talking about this, but kind of more as a recap, is they're providing new and unfamiliar environments that invite us into these liminal spaces, which are opportunities for connection, and they challenge the whole person, not just us cognitively or a one dimension, but really our whole being. And this intentional mentorship is just a natural byproduct of being out there in vulnerable spaces with others who also care about your growth. The silence and reflection, there's so much space for this. I feel like personally, maybe it's part of the order for me. Maybe it's just like the simplicity of being in wilderness, just brings my whole body at ease. Like, I feel like I am my truest self in those silent places. And then the focus and the simplicity, like, there's something about, Teresa, you use this lingo all the time, of like leveling the playing fields, of, like, there's less power hierarchies. You're all wearing the same dirty, stinky clothing. You're all very human in these spaces of wilderness. And it's harder to have an ego, I think, when you're out there for a long time with the same people. And so it's just like, I feel like it's just like brings out people's fullest potential in very natural ways. Some of my favorite. You get the real deal, the authenticity. You can't tell me you trust people, but then won't let me belay you, like, and you can't, it's like good turnaround time of like, direct feedback. That's the word I'm getting at. Yeah. So love these faces. Just some powerful photos of just like, we're working with our body as we cultivate our soul that transforms our spirit. As we, just like engage with the whole person in these wild spaces. I love that center picture too. We've all probably had those moments, and they're so good for our internal world. I would actually argue a need for our internal world. Yeah. And so outcomes of wilderness experiences, we're not just taking people on outdoor adventures here at SROM, although we are, but we're wanting encounters with God's love, no matter who you are. Experience with God, experience with spirituality, or not. Like, anybody's invited, and we want deeper trust of self, God, and others, resilience to face any challenge, in the face of any challenge, and then an invitation into Christ's identity as sons and daughters of light around the world, around the globe. The expression on this student's face is one of my favorites, and all of ours, really. But we provide an opportunity for people to claim those moments of transformation while still in them. And water baptism is one way we do that at SROM. And this student had done a 40-day expedition with me, and then came back for our 2-week instructor training, and actually broke her arm on that journey and continued on. So wild. Only broken bone I've ever had. But yeah, she's getting baptized here, and I think we're exclaiming about the cold water, because there's snow there. But it was just a beautiful experience to be part of her journey and transformation, really. And here's where I have more comments and questions. The first picture of me in the blue was standing up right here by this rock, looking down onto the glacier behind this. So now we kind of have come full circle. And this is one of our 40 teams summiting Gannett Peak again. So any comments or questions before we wrap up?
Wow, this has been so cool. I will defer again to anyone else other than myself. I have lots of interest in this topic. I love how you described the I am statements as kind of aspirational. Like, you can claim an I am statement even if there's doubts within you about, like, can I really live this? Is this really true? You can still claim it and then like act as if you believe it's true, and it can become true.
For sure.
That struck me. And then I just wanted to ask a couple clarifying things. So are your guides, would you consider your guides to be clergy per se, or do you have like a specific name or a role for them? Not necessarily. You do consider yourself a ministry though. So that's interesting. So can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I guess we consider ourselves a ministry just because, like, honestly, I sometimes wonder why ministry is in our name. When you travel abroad, people are like, there's like branches of government that are ministry, which I've always thought was interesting. But anyhow, here in the US, yeah, like, yes, we're ministry because we're like doing our best to serve people however we feel like we might best serve them. And so we're a parachurch organization. We're not affiliated with any organization in particular or any denomination in particular. And yeah, just like want to serve anybody, invite anybody to experience Christ in wilderness. And so we've worked with Catholic to like very Pentecostal to a secular college, like we work with any spectrum of people that are open to working with us. And some of them we do like spiritual curriculum, some we don't, some we are just strictly guiding. And those are more custom and kind of just depends what they're wanting and how we can best serve them. But we're pretty flexible in that area as long as they're wanting to go into deep wilderness spaces.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful. And you have the approach of like, well, we're going to serve you the way that Christ would want us to serve you, like no matter who you are and no matter what you're asking. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. As long as it continues to align with like our beliefs, like, or like as long as we can continue living out of our practices authentically.
Sure.
Yeah, we're fine. Yeah. Having anybody along.
You do have a kind of a specialized program that is, I don't know what it is exactly, but you invite folks in who are practicing clergy in some sense. Am I right?
That's a good question. We do, like, we've done whole groups of like pastors before.
Maybe that's what I'm thinking of. Yeah.
But we like as instructors, like we don't require any of our staff to like have any, like we love them to have like vibrant relationships with Christ. And often like that's the kind of staff we attract. But yeah, you don't have degrees or requirements
or something. Yeah. Interesting.
No.
Mm-hmm. No. Yeah. And
unless you count like our 2-week instructor training as a test, which to some degree
I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is.
Yeah.
That's great. Teresa said WMPC in the chat. What does that mean, Teresa?
Yeah, so our WMPC is our instructor training.
Oh, I see.
And we call it our Wilderness Ministry Professional course. And it's not, and we call it that because it's not specific to just people who want to instruct with us. It's open to anybody who wants to maybe like work for another organization, maybe found their own wilderness ministry, maybe work for SROM, and maybe like go guide somewhere else, but wants like a faith foundation. So we're very flexible of like partnering with other people to like really, like we're really teaching the philosophy of SROM on that course, like why we do what we do and why it works. Yeah, it's super great. We're going to the Grand Canyon in 2 weeks, or not 2 weeks. Oh my, is it 2 weeks? I hope not. It's I think about a month, and we're going down there, and we'll be on the North Rim in very remote places for that expedition, and I get to go on that, so I'm really excited. It's really stunning, beautiful scenery. Yeah.
Oh, very cool. Amazing.
Yeah.
Any other last like comments, questions for Melita before we do a prize draw?
Oh yeah, the prize draw. And I'll put this up. If you scan this code, I believe it gets you to the free catalog page.
Nice.
If not, SROM.org will. So, yeah. I'll leave it up for a second and I'll stop the screen share.
Okay, that's amazing. Well, thank you so much, Melita, for being here. It's been a pleasure to get to know you and your organization, and I was so thrilled when you and your organization also agreed to support you coming here. That's really something that we value. It's been great to hear kind of like what sets you apart from all the other great organizations that do wilderness work. That's been very cool to hear. It's been cool to hear, touching on some of the biblical stories and the scriptures, and Hosea that you mentioned. I'm going to go home and look that one up. I'm not familiar with my Bible as well as I could be, and Hosea would be one of those places. So thank you so much.
Really appreciate it. I thought Romans 8 is the other piece talks about creation groaning, if you want to look up that one.
Oh, yes.
Romans 8.
I do,
Yeah.
and I have all these notes from you talking and things I want to look up. I wrote
Oh
down
my.
12:1, so I'm going to write down 8 as well. That's great. Okay, well, there's 5 people here in addition to Melita and myself, and so here's my invitation. I have dropped in the chat the link to our stickers and badges page, and Rachel knows this page well because you have won a couple of these at different events. Here's our stickers and badges page. So if your number gets picked, you can go and pick out a sticker, and I will send you a sticker from our collection for free. Okay, so we'll go in alphabetical order. I've set this up between 1 and 5, and we won't count myself or Melita, so drum roll. Oh. Am I still here? I feel like I froze. No, I think what happened is I pressed generate and it gave me the same number that was already showing, which is 2. So we won't discount that, and number 2 would be Rachel Glick.
What?
What I have. Yeah. So you go send me an email, or you can look right now and let me know before you leave. Which sticker would you like? And drop your address to me in the chat and I'll send that to you. So thanks very much, everyone. Thanks, Melita. Let's give Melita a round of applause. Really appreciate you being here. Thanks, everyone, for dropping in tonight. It's been great to get to know you folks, and maybe we'll see you again at a future event.
Thank you so much, Dad. Great to be here with you.